I am Ernest Caldwell. I am 67 years old, and I buried my wife of 43 years this morning. The ground was frozen solid. It always is in January in Kingston, and they had to use a mechanical digger to break through. Frances would have hated that. She always said she wanted to go quietly, with dignity. Nothing about January in Ontario is quiet or dignified. I was standing at the graveside when Agatha touched my arm. She and Frances had been friends for 32 years. She lived 4 houses down from us on Lakeview Drive, and for 32 years she and my wife had walked together every Sunday morning, rain or snow. She was the kind of woman you don't notice until you suddenly realize she has always been there. "Ernest," she said, her voice low, almost lost under the wind coming off the lake. "I need to speak with you privately, not here, not today, but soon." She pressed a folded piece of paper into my gloved hand. "Call me tonight, not from the house, please." I looked at her. Her eyes were red, but they weren't soft. They were frightened. "Agatha." "Don't tell Sylvie," she whispered, "and not her husband. Promise me." I promised. I didn't know why. I just promised. The reception afterwards was at our house, the bungalow Frances and I had built together on Lakeview Drive 40 years ago. She had picked out every tile in that kitchen. She had planted the cedar hedge along the front herself, one spring when I was working overtime on a contract job outside of Napanee. I stood in the middle of my own living room, holding a cup of tea that someone had put in my hands, and I watched people I barely recognized walk through the rooms she had made. My daughter Sylvie was near the front door with her husband Pascal, greeting people. She looked put together. Too put together, I remember thinking, for a woman who had just buried her mother. But grief looks different on different people. I told myself that. Pascal was the one who caught my attention. He kept glancing at me across the room, not with sympathy. Not the way you look at a man who has just lost his wife. He looked at me the way a man looks at an appointment he has been waiting to keep. I went to the kitchen to be alone for a moment. I could hear them through the half-open door, Sylvie and Pascal, voices low. "He needs to sign this week," Pascal said, "before the estate process starts, before anyone starts asking questions." "He's grieving," Sylvie said, but she didn't say it the way a daughter says it. She said it the way someone says it's raining, a fact, an inconvenience. "People don't grieve forever," Pascal said. "We need this done cleanly." I am a retired electrician. I spent 40 years working with systems that look simple on the surface and kill you if you don't understand what is running underneath. I have always known the difference between a live wire and a dead one. What I heard in that kitchen felt live. "What if he actually reads it?" Sylvie asked. Pascal laughed. It was a short, quiet sound. "He's 67 and he just lost his wife. He is not going to read anything." I set my tea down on the counter and walked back into the living room before they could see me. That evening, after the last guests had gone and Sylvie and Pascal had settled into the guest room, I went into my workshop in the garage. It is the one place in the house that is purely mine. Old tools hanging on pegboards, the smell of sawdust and machine oil. Frances used to say it smelled like work, and she meant it as a compliment. I called Agatha from the old landline I had never bothered to remove. She answered on the first ring. "Ernest, are you alone?" "Yes." She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Frances gave me something 3 months ago, a sealed envelope with your name on it. She told me, and I need you to hear this clearly, she told me, if I die and it isn't natural, give this to Ernest. Make sure Pascal never sees it." The floor felt uncertain under me. I sat down on my workshop stool. "She gave you that 3 months ago," I said. "Yes." She knew something was wrong. She was terrified, Ernest. But she was also the most careful person I have ever known. She didn't want to tell you until she had proof. She was afraid that if you confronted them before she had something solid, Pascal would find a way to turn it around. Agatha paused. She was also afraid of what he might do to you. I thought about the last 6 months. Frances had started getting tired in August. Not normal tired, the kind of tired that sits in your bones and doesn't leave. Her hands shook. Her hair thinned until she started wearing a scarf around the house. The doctors ran blood work and couldn't agree. Her GP in Kingston said it was probably a systemic autoimmune response, possibly accelerated by age. She was 64. They said 64 wasn't young. Francis had looked at me one evening last October in this same workshop and said, "Ernest, something is wrong with me that isn't what they're saying it is." I hadn't known what to do with that. I had held her hand. "There's someone else you need to meet," Agatha said. "A man I hired. Francis asked me to hire him. I want you to come to my house tomorrow morning, early, before Sylvie and Pascal are up." I went at 6:30. It was still dark, -15, and the snow on Lakeview Drive was blue-white under the streetlights. 4 houses down had never felt so far. Agatha's kitchen smelled like real coffee. She poured me a mug and sat across from me at her small table, and then she placed an envelope in front of me. My name, written in Francis's handwriting, shaky, but hers. The letters slightly larger than they used to be, the way they had gotten near the end. "There's someone in the other room," Agatha said. "I want you to meet him first, then you can read that." He was sitting at Agatha's dining room table, mid-50s. A compact, quiet man in a dark wool jacket, the kind of man who looked like he had spent a career learning to not be noticed. He stood when I came in and offered his hand. "Rick Desjardins. I'm a private investigator. Your wife hired me through Agatha 11 weeks ago." I sat down. I did not trust my legs. "She hired you," I repeated. "She came to me with a very specific concern," he said. "She believed she was being poisoned, and she believed she knew who was doing it." I wanted to say that was impossible, that Francis was a practical woman, not given to paranoia. But I had heard what I heard through that kitchen door, and I had seen Pascal's face at the graveside, and I had watched my wife become a stranger to her own body over 6 months. "Tell me," I said. Rick opened a folder on the table. He was careful and methodical, the way good tradespeople are. He didn't rush. Francis had noticed changes in her health in mid-August. She had also noticed, around the same time, that Pascal had begun coming over more regularly, always when I was out on my Saturday errands, always with some excuse. He brought groceries. He offered to help her with her medications, sorting her weekly pill organizer. He brewed her evening herbal tea. He was attentive in a way he had never been in 15 years of marriage to Sylvie. "She didn't want to believe it at first," Rick said. "She told Agatha she felt watched, managed, her own word." "She used that word with me," I said, "back in October. She went to a second doctor in Belleville, not her GP. She told him she was concerned about environmental exposure at an old job site. She asked for a full heavy metals panel. She paid cash. She didn't want the results going through her regular OHIP file, because she was afraid Pascal would find a way to access them." Rick tapped the folder. "He is a financial advisor. He has ways of accessing information that most people don't realize." What did the results show? Elevated arsenic levels. Not dangerously high at that point, but consistent with chronic low-dose exposure over 2 to 3 months. Rick looked at me steadily. "It doesn't occur naturally at that level. Someone was giving it to her." I sat with that for a moment. "And me?" I asked, because I had already understood, somewhere in my chest, what the answer was going to be. Rick was quiet for 1 second. "Your wife suspected you were also being dosed. She noticed you were slower than usual, forgetting small things, more fatigued than your age should account for. She was very specific about the delivery method she suspected." He paused. "Your vitamin supplements, the ones in the bathroom cabinet." I thought about the orange pill organizer Francis had set up for me 2 years ago. Blood pressure medication, a multivitamin, magnesium. I took them every morning with my breakfast. Pascal had refilled the bottle for me twice in the last 4 months. He had shown up with the same brand from the pharmacy, said Francis had asked him to pick them up. I had not questioned it. "We collected a sample," Rick said. "Agatha retrieved 3 capsules from the bottle in your cabinet last week, while you and Francis were at the hospital. We had them analyzed." He slid a lab report across the table. "I am not a chemist, but I can read a summary page. Arsenic trioxide, present at levels consistent with intentional contamination." "Every morning," I said. "Every morning," Rick confirmed. I pressed my hands flat on the table. I needed to feel something solid. Agatha put her hand on my arm. I barely felt it. "She collected those samples," I said, "while she was dying." "She was very deliberate," Agatha said softly. "She told me I can't protect myself anymore, but I can protect Ernest." Francis had done one more thing before she went into hospital for the last time. She had placed 3 things in Agatha's keeping: the envelope with my name on it, the lab results from Belleville, and a handwritten statement describing everything she had observed: Pascal's access to her medications, the changes in her health, a specific incident in September when she had found him in the bathroom with her pill organizer, and he had laughed it off with an explanation that hadn't quite made sense. She had done all of this while she was sick and frightened and carrying a secret she couldn't share with me, because she was protecting me from doing something that might get me killed. I picked up the envelope. I opened it. My hands were not steady. Her handwriting, 4 pages, dated November 14th, 2 months before she died. Ernest, if you're reading this, then what I feared has happened. I tried to leave a note in your workshop last month, but I found it had been moved. Pascal must have been in there. I couldn't risk a direct conversation because he monitors my phone. I know how this sounds. I know you would have acted immediately, and I could not let you walk into that house, knowing what you know without protection. He caught me looking at his financial records in September. Not our records, his own. He'd left his laptop open by mistake. I saw enough. He is in debt to people who don't use lawyers, Ernest. Close to $800,000. He has been using clients' investment funds to cover his losses, and he has been using our RRSP as collateral for loans he forged your signature on. I confronted him. I told him I would go to the RCMP. He was very calm. That frightened me more than anything else. 3 weeks later, I started getting sick. I don't have more time. Get to Agatha. She has everything. Please be careful. Please don't grieve so hard that you stop paying attention. I love you. I have always loved you. 43 years was not enough. I folded the letter and held it for a long time. Nobody in the room spoke. Then I said, "What do we do?" Rick had already spoken to the OPP through a contact he trusted. The lab results were with them. Francis's handwritten statement was with them. But they needed more. A Crown attorney had reviewed the file and told Rick the same thing. The evidence was strong, but a defense lawyer, and with $800,000 in hidden assets, Pascal would hire a good one, could argue contamination, could argue the samples were mishandled, could argue Francis's statement was the confused writing of a gravely ill woman. They needed him to do it again, on camera, with a clean chain of evidence. "No," Agatha said immediately. "He's right," I said. She looked at me. "Francis spent her last 2 months building this case," I said. "I am not going to watch it collapse in court, because we didn't finish what she started." Rick explained the plan. My daughter and her husband were sleeping in my guest room. They were expecting me to sign documents that morning. Documents I still hadn't seen in full. Rick had obtained a copy through a source at the registry office. It was not a simple power of attorney. It was a will amendment, drafted to look like an update Francis and I had agreed upon together. It reallocated our estate, the house, the RRSP remainder, Francis's life insurance payout, entirely to Sylvie and Pascal, bypassing the original equal split to our grandchildren, and buried in the final pages, language that would transfer legal liability for any financial irregularities in our joint accounts to me as the surviving account holder. In other words, if anyone ever investigated the missing RRSP funds, the paper trail would point at me. It was elegant, and it was evil. Pascal had not just planned to kill us. He had planned to make me the explanation for everything. "If you go back this morning," Rick said, "you tell them you have thought it over, you're ready to sign. You ask them to stay for breakfast. You ask your son-in-law to sort your vitamins like he always does. I'll have a team in position outside. We'll have audio from a transmitter. Small, goes under your collar. The moment he interferes with anything you're consuming, it's over." I walked back to my house in the dark. -17. The snow on the path to my front door was undisturbed. They hadn't come looking for me, which meant they weren't worried yet. They thought I was a grief-stunned old man who would eventually come home and do what he was told. I stood at my own front door for a moment. 40 years I had lived behind this door. Francis had hung the wreath on it every Christmas. The wood was solid fir, painted dark green. I had hung it myself when we moved in. I went inside. The kitchen light was on. Pascal was already up, sitting at the table with his phone. He looked up when he heard me. "Where were you?" "Not inventory." Agatha's, I said. My voice sounded older than usual. I let it. I just needed to talk to someone. She was Francis's oldest friend. He nodded, something relaxed in his face. Of course, he said. Of course you did. I'm sorry we weren't more. We should have checked on you. Sylvie appeared in the doorway in her housecoat, arms crossed. Her expression cycled through something complicated and settled on careful concern. Dad, we were worried. I'm fine, I said. I sat down at the kitchen table, in my chair, the one I had sat in every morning for 40 years. I've been thinking. You're right. I can't manage all of this on my own. I don't know what Francis was thinking about some of these account structures. I should have paid more attention. I rubbed my face. I want to sign the papers today, get it sorted. The change in the room was immediate. They tried not to show it. But 43 years of reading people's faces, and my wife had spent her last months warning me to pay attention. I saw it. Relief. Raw, immediate relief. Of course, Dad, Sylvie said. We'll take care of everything. I want breakfast first, I said. Just a proper breakfast, the three of us. I looked at my son-in-law. Pascal, could you get my vitamins sorted, and could you make the coffee? Francis always said you made the best. Mine never tasted right to her. Used too much water, she said. He smiled. It was the smile of a man who thinks he has already won. Sure, he said. I'll take care of it. I sat at the table. I talked about Francis. I told Sylvie about the time her mother had driven 3 hours in a blizzard to bring me lunch on a job site outside of Napanee because she had heard on the radio that the roads were bad and she didn't want me eating vending machine sandwiches. Sylvie smiled at that. For a moment she looked like my daughter, the girl I had taught to skate on the rink behind the community center in the winter of 1989. In the kitchen, Pascal opened the cabinet. He moved quickly, efficiently. He knew exactly which bottle. He shook out 2 capsules into his palm. Then he reached into the pocket of his housecoat. The small, dark vial was in his hand for 3 seconds before it went back into his pocket. 2 capsules replaced in the organizer, with 2 that looked identical. He brought the organizer to the table along with a mug of coffee. Here you go, he said. Take those with your coffee. The pharmacist said it's better absorbed that way. I looked at the capsules in my hand. I looked at him. Thank you, I said. I set the capsules on the table beside my mug and reached for the document folder instead, as if I had been distracted. Let me just get this over with first, then breakfast properly. I can't eat until this is off my mind. He sat down across from me. He was very still, watching. I picked up the pen he slid across the table, and I set it down. Before I sign, I said, I want you to know something. They both looked at me. Frances knew. My voice was quiet. She knew everything, Pascal. The RRSP withdrawals you made in our name without telling me. The loans you took against our property using my forged signature. The client funds that moved through the accounts you attached to ours. I looked at my daughter, and she knew what was happening to her, and to me. The color left Pascal's face, slowly the way a room loses light when a cloud moves across the sun. Dad, Sylvie started. She left a letter, I said. She left lab results. She left a statement with Agatha. She started putting it together 4 months ago because she understood that if she told me directly, you would find a way to stop her before she had proof. I looked at my son-in-law. You went through her things. You found the note she tried to leave me in the workshop, didn't you? He was very still. She knew that too, I said. She wrote it down. The front door opened. 2 OPP officers in plain clothes came through first, followed by 2 in uniform. Agatha was behind them, standing in the doorway with her coat still on. Pascal stood up so fast, his chair fell backward. He looked at the door. He looked at me. He looked at the capsules sitting on the table beside my untouched mug. Get those, one of the officers said. An evidence bag was already in his hand. Sylvie didn't run. She sat very still, and then she said in a voice I had never heard from my daughter before, It was him. I want to say that now. It was his idea. He told me Francis had already figured out the debts. He said if she told anyone, we would lose everything. She didn't look at Pascal. He told me the amounts were small. He said it would just slow her down, buy us time to fix the accounts. He said it wouldn't. Stop talking, Pascal said. She stopped. She put her face in her hands. The officer read them their rights. I sat at my kitchen table and listened and they sounded distant, like something happening in another house. Through the window, I could see Agatha on my front step. She wasn't crying. She was standing straight, the way Frances used to stand straight when something was hard. I thought about my wife at a clinic in Belleville in October, while she was sick and frightened, asking a doctor she had never met before for a test she wasn't supposed to need. I thought about her sorting through her medications in the dim light of our bedroom, setting aside a sample in a small bag she had hidden behind a box of Christmas ornaments on the high shelf of her closet. I thought about her writing 4 pages by hand on November 14th, while her hands shook, telling me exactly what I needed to know and exactly how to protect myself. She had been a bookkeeper for 18 years. Her whole life was about numbers adding up correctly. She had looked at the numbers of her own illness and understood what they were telling her, and she had refused to let it end without doing something that mattered. Rick came in after the officers. He nodded at me once. "We have what we need," he said. "The capsule substitution was caught on audio and the samples will go to the same lab in Belleville. Same analyst. Airtight chain of custody." He picked up his jacket from the chair where he had left it an hour earlier. "She built a good case, your wife." "She was a very thorough woman," I said. A lawyer named Claudette arrived that afternoon at Agatha's house, where I had gone because I could not be in my own home while it was still a scene. She laid out what the Crown would use: Frances's letter, the Belleville blood work, the handwritten statement, the lab analysis of the capsules, the audio from that morning, and the financial records Rick had compiled, the RRSP withdrawals, the forged signatures on 2 home equity applications, the client funds that had moved through shell accounts Pascal had set up using our address. "He is looking at criminal fraud, criminal negligence causing bodily harm, and manslaughter," she said. "Possibly first-degree murder, depending on what the Crown can establish about intent. Your daughter's situation is more complicated. Her lawyer will argue she was misled about the severity. The Crown will argue she participated knowingly." Claudette looked at me. "It will be ugly." "She knew he was putting something in the capsules," I said. Claudette nodded. She admitted that this morning. The trial was 8 months later. I testified twice. The first time I answered questions about Frances, who she was, what her health had been like, the timeline of her decline. I looked at the jury, and I talked about my wife the way she deserved to be talked about. A woman who worked 18 years as a senior bookkeeper and never once let a number sit wrong without chasing it down. A woman who, in the last months of her life, turned that same precision on the people who were hurting her and built a case that outlasted her. The second time I described the morning in my kitchen, the capsules on the table, the untouched mug of coffee, my son-in-law's face when the front door opened. The defense argued the vitamin contamination could have come from a faulty batch at the pharmacy. The lab results demonstrated it could not. The defense argued Frances's letter was the confused writing of a woman in medical distress. Her Belleville doctor testified that her cognition at the time of the statement was fully intact. The defense argued the audio recording was ambiguous. The jury watched the evidence bag hold up through 11 seconds of courtroom silence. They deliberated for 6 hours. Guilty on all counts for Pascal: criminal fraud, criminal negligence, manslaughter in the first degree. Guilty on 2 counts for Sylvie: participation in criminal negligence, conspiracy. Pascal was sentenced to 18 years without parole. Sylvie received 7 years with eligibility at 4. Her lawyer had argued she had been controlled and deceived. I do not know if that is entirely true. I sat in that courtroom and looked at my daughter, and I thought about the little girl who used to fall asleep on my shoulder at hockey games when she was 5 years old, and I did not know how both things could be true at the same time. That she was that little girl, and also the woman who had stood in my kitchen while her husband opened that cabinet. I don't know how to hold that. I suspect I will spend a long time trying. The house on Lakeview Drive is still mine. My grandchildren came for Easter. I made the same lamb Frances always made, from the recipe she had taped to the inside of the spice cabinet door. Her handwriting on that card. I left it exactly where it was. Agatha comes for coffee on Sunday mornings now. We walk the same street she and Frances walked for 32 years. She doesn't try to fill the silence, and I am grateful for that. Some mornings the lake is flat and silver, and the light comes through the cedars at an angle that Frances always said made the whole street look like a postcard. She was right. It still does. She saved my life from 50 kilometers away, from a hospital bed, from the last pages of a notebook she could barely hold. She was the most thorough person I have ever known. 43 years was not enough. But she made sure there would be more years ahead of me, and I have decided that is going to have to mean something.